Hi, everyone. Welcome to Where Are All the Women? I'm Meghan Murphy, and this is Mary Lou Singleton.
Hi, everybody.
If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you would like to ask a question or leave a comment that you want us to address on the stream, please use the super chat so that we see it. How are you doing this week, Mary Lou?
I am just up and down and all around. Oh, yeah. How about you? How are you feeling about everything?
Well, I'm feeling good in general in my
Good.
personal life. I've been getting back to my regular routine at the gym and working since the holidays threw everything into turmoil. So I feel good in general. I mean, I think it's a very exciting time and I'm loving what's going on, but I'm also totally enraged because I feel like one, it's revealing how messed up things have been for the past. I mean, who even knows how we could define the past how long, but I mean, at least since, 2016, with regard to the media and the shady government or the shady behavior that the government's been engaged in. But, I just like, I'm particularly enraged by the trans kids thing. And I think it's sort of because it's like, look how easy this was to undo. Not that it's all undone, but, Trump issued yet another really great executive order. Essentially, I guess, ending the transing of minors at the federal level in any case, no more federal funding for the transitioning of kids. And it's so disgusting to me that this ever happened and that anybody went along with it. And, yes, of course, it's good that it's ending or hopefully it's ending and this will stick. Obviously people are so organized and enraged about this and are knowledgeable about it at this point that I think that some people are worried that maybe it'll just be undone if the Democrats come back into power next election. And I had tweeted that I was like, there's no way that Canada is gonna have the balls to cling to this once America is done with this. I mean, Canada really does. Canada likes to pretend it's totally anti-America, but in most and many ways, the country still does follow the trends that America sets. And, I just don't think that now that we know that it's bunk, now that it's been spelled out by the American government that it's bunk, that there's no science behind this, that it does constitute, they had the term female genital mutilation in that executive order. One of the sections read that, let me see if I can find it in my extensive notes here. That probably won't help me at all because there's too many of them. But, it outlined that the Attorney General shall review Department of Justice enforcement of Section 116 of Title 18 United States Code and prioritize enforcement of protections against female genital mutilation. Because it is genital mutilation. It is sterilization, which they also outline. How could they have done this to so many kids and so many minors? It's just so horrific to me.
I will never understand how this one took off. I just have a hard time believing that so many people could be so, I don't know if idiotic is the word. It's just evil what's happening, to be so brainwashed into thinking this was a good idea to sterilize children and to defend it. And to promote it, to defend it. I can't believe this even ever started. But then I look at the whole picture of our society and, the huge number of kids on psych meds, the medicalization of the whole society, just how everyone is nuts now. But apparently not everyone, because I think what we're seeing could be described as revenge of the normies, right? Like this is like the regular people, the taxpayers, the people who just want to live a normal life are fed up with this craziness. And maybe, it's nice that we're seeing that the majority of Americans don't support this. I loved the executive order. Was this one written by May Mailman as well? Do you know if
I don't
she
know,
did
but I'm
this
going to
one?
ask her because I believe she's coming on my podcast tomorrow.
Oh, yay. Excellent. It's a really exciting time. I keep thinking back to 2014, 2015, where there were like 20 TERFs in the whole country. And we're all hiding out at Mishfest trying to organize. And there were so few of us. And now it's taken off. It's mainstream. It's a little weird that so many people are making money off of it. And those original TERFs get very little credit for breaking ground and for starting the alarm about all of this. But this is mainstream now to critique this.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine to speak about all these things among your friends and obviously online now, which was absolutely not the case, like even just a couple of years ago, right?
For so long, you were disappeared from the comments section. You were banned from ever speaking there again. You could lose your job. I hope we've gotten to the place where women in the bastions of this ideology I can speak freely, like the universities, the big medical systems. Do you see that Ethan Hames, the charges against the whistleblower doctor in Texas were dropped as well?
No.
Ethan Hames is a pediatrician at a major children's hospital in Texas. I should know which one, but I don't. And he came forward saying that many pediatric gender mutilations were happening there. And he was charged, the FBI came to his house and he was charged with HIPAA violations for sharing personal information by coming forward and saying, I know of this case, I know of this case. And he didn't use personal information, like identifying information, but just talked about the cases. And they came at him with federal charges, threatening him with a long time in jail. And all of the charges against him were dropped this week as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. I mean, in general, what's happened to all of these people who spoke truths about health and about medicine and about big pharma. The obvious one is COVID and the vaccines and RFK Jr. and but also Jay Bhattacharya and people like that. And that now it's just being reported on and spoken about openly by like the CIA and the New York Times. And it's just, it makes you want to punch them in the face. Like these people all knew that they were lying all along and you vilified and, persecuted and in some cases, tried to prosecute and took away people's licenses and things like that. And now you're like, oh yeah, that is what's happening. I mean, they're still trying to vilify RFK Jr., which I find very, I don't know, I find it actually kind of amusing because he's so good. Like he was so good in his responses at the Senate. And was that today? Was that yesterday?
It was today.
Is it today?
I think it's going on today. It's enraging watching them. My hatred of these
the Democrats,
big pharma-backed Democrats, it knows no bounds. I'm watching Elizabeth Warren interrogate him. I just felt contempt for her. I can't believe what she was saying to him. And she, and the lies, the lying and the lying and the lying, where she kept stating that he was going to take away vaccines for all children, that, no one will be able to get vaccines. We're just saying these shouldn't be mandated. And then B, more importantly, they should be tested like every other drug. They should go through the same rigorous testing practices that every drug goes through. And also, don't lump all vaccines together. You're a total idiot who knows nothing about health if you just parrot vaccines are safe and effective. You're talking about hundreds of different medications. That's no less idiotic than just saying pharmaceuticals are safe and effective, right? Like,
yeah, like what are you talking about? Just across the board? That's a crazy thing to say.
Right.
And you guys are the ones who are against the science. Like you guys are the ones who are advocating against rigorous testing and science around these vaccines. And who knowingly lied about the COVID so-called vaccine. Right. Even Bernie Sanders, like I was just like, you suck. Like,
I hate him too. Yeah.
Yeah, like when he was interrogating RFK Jr. about some onesie that his old the what is that organization that
Uh,
he's
the Children's Health Defense.
yeah.
Hmm.
There was a onesie, I guess, that they were selling that says something about being unvaxxed, and Bernie Sanders was like, "Are you going to tell this organization to pull this onesie?" And he was like, "I'm not involved in the organization anymore. I had to resign because of my new position now." And also,
Also,
like, who cares? Why can't they sell this onesie that, free speech, man?
mhm.
Like, I mean, I'm not they all did this to themselves. Like, I never in my life thought about vaccines. I was never gung ho about vaccines. I was never anti vaccines. I didn't really, like, I took the vaccines that I was given as a child and then sort
Mhm.
of didn't think about it ever again. And now it's like, no, I don't trust this stuff at all. Like anything that seems like a cash cow for big pharma, I'm going to question, and everybody should.
Everyone should, and every year there's another vaccine on the schedule, and these again, I just hold them in absolute contempt. These big pharma shills who do not care about the chronic health crisis in the United States and the chronic health crisis in our children keep bringing up polio and smallpox when we are not talking about those
Right.
vaccines. The smallpox vaccine hasn't been given in the United States since 1968. Like, I didn't get a smallpox vaccine. My sister got one. She was born the year before me. I did not get one. That vaccine has not been given to children here in over 50 years. And we, small, but like, we're not talking about that vaccine.
We're
The
talking about
polio
like
vaccine,
Gardasil and like why
yeah.
babies are being vaccinated, supposedly vaccinated against HPV.
And why babies are getting a hepatitis B vaccine within the first few hours of life. Hepatitis B is spread through IV drug use and unsafe sex practices. It's it's the most idiotic one to give to a newborn of all the things that a baby might be at risk of. They can't, I guess they can't back up and give the pertussis vaccine, but now they want to give this new RSV vaccine, which is another mRNA vaccine, which has this crazy risk profile and doesn't decrease hospitalizations in kids. When it's given to pregnant women, it increases the risk of preterm birth. These are the vaccines we're questioning. And these are the vaccines that are getting put on the CDC schedule and pushed on every child in the United States. Every year, it's at least one new vaccine. Right.
When we
And
just went through 4 years of people being forced to take a vaccine that wasn't a vaccine, that didn't work, and that caused more harm than it did good, that caused more spread of COVID and more deaths than it prevented.
right.
Like, and then
The,
they're hiding all of these vaccine injuries that people have.
mm-hmm. And they're damaging women. They're damaging the hearts of young men. Right, the COVID vaccine was a disaster when it was given to low risk populations who did not need that vaccine. The risks of the vaccine were higher than the risk of getting COVID for the majority of people who were forced to get that vaccine. Yeah, I'm over it, and I don't know if he's going to get approved though.
I think
I
he will. How
You
could
think
he?
so?
I don't know how this process works, actually. I was going to ask you because I'm new to this. So what happens here? Like, so they're, interrogated. They have to answer to all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And then what? Like how do they decide?
The Senate votes, and I think it's simple majority. So if it's
Okay.
tied 50-50, JD Vance will break the tie. So Senate in the United States, we have 2 senators for every state, and then we have representatives. The number of that is based on the population of the state. So in the Senate, it's an even 100 senators, and then the vice president, like, is the kind of the procedural head of the Senate, and the vice president breaks any ties. So I
I
don't know. I
mean,
mean, if all the Republicans vote for him, he will win. But I'm not sure. Big Pharma is they run this town. They're the mafia.
yeah. I guess I just thought he did such a good job that it would be so crazy to vote against him, but obviously
Yeah.
they are immoral people. I mean, I think what happens with Tulsi is more worrying because she's a real truth teller, right? I mean, not that I don't mean
RFK,
real as though RFK isn't. I just mean like I think she's seen as a really big danger to these people and the deep state.
I think both of them are for sure. Those are the two most radical appointees. If he's not approved, Trump has the option of waiting till there's a congressional recess. So when Congress is on vacation, and he can do a recess appointment, which is this loophole in the law where if there's an unfilled position and Congress isn't available to approve, he could do a recess appointment. I don't know if he'll have the backbone to do that. I mean, we'll see what happens. That would be the other option. Did you see the study that came out this week in Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law? And it was called Vaccination and Neurodevelopment Disorders, a study of 9-year-old children enrolled in Medicaid. This is incredible. It's from Florida, where they studied data from nearly 50,000 9-year-old children, and they found that vaccination was associated with significantly increased odds for all measured neurodevelopmental disorders. Among children born preterm and vaccinated, 39.9% were diagnosed with at least one neurodevelopmental disorder, compared to 15% of those born preterm and unvaccinated. It said children with just one vaccine were 1.7 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than the unvaccinated, where those with 11 or more visits for vaccines were 4.4 times more likely to have autism. This is enormous. Like, this just came out this week. Since I've been involved in healthcare, so the early 90s, the powers that be have been refusing to allow a vaxxed-unvaxxed study to come out. Like, that's one thing that those of us who are critical of the current vaccine situation want a study showing what are the overall health outcomes between the unvaccinated children and the vaccinated children. They refuse to do the unvaxxed study. Dr. Paul Thomas, who's a pediatrician who was pro-choice on vaccines and became kind of anti-vax watching the outcomes in his practice, he did that study on his practice, just published the data from the thousands of kids in his practice in Oregon. And it made it through peer review, and it was published in a pediatric journal. And he was punished by having his license first suspended. He fought really hard to get his license back. He could only practice now under very, very strict circumstances. He can only do urgent care. He can't do primary care. He can't advise on vaccines. They persecuted him so hard. So of course, no one else is doing it. Andrew Wakefield just postulated that MMR reactions might be causing gut inflammation seen in children with autism. And just by posing the question, he was vilified globally. So this is enormous that Florida just published the vaxxed-unvaxxed study that we've been waiting for. And it doesn't look good. It looks like our vaccine schedule and our birth practices are contributing to this epidemic of neurological and developmental disorders in our kids.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I'm just going to read part of his opening statement for people who didn't watch today, because I just thought it was so good. And it just, like, it really drills in how incredible it is that people are working so hard against him. Like, he's not saying anything crazy. It does sound radical in this particular context because we're dealing with a bunch of big pharma shills, but everything that he said is true. It's inarguably true. So he said, today, Americans' overall health is in grievous condition. Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. That's crazy.
How much again? How many?
Over 70% of adults and a third of children in America are overweight or obese.
Wow.
Like, crazy. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s. Cancer among young people is rising by 1 or 2% a year. Autoimmune diseases, neurodevelopmental disorders, Alzheimer's, asthma, ADHD, depression, addiction, and a host of other physical and mental health conditions are all on the rise, some of them exponentially. The United States has worse health than any other developed nation, yet we spend more on healthcare, at least double, and in some cases triple what other countries spend. Last year we spent 4.8 trillion, not counting the indirect cost of missed work. Blah 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 blah. He also, like, I thought this part was interesting because I never in my entire life questioned Canada's healthcare system. I just assumed, universal healthcare is a good thing, healthcare coverage is a good thing. But, he's gone after the Affordable Care Act. And I think Medicaid as well. He said Americans don't like the Affordable Care Act. And he said they would prefer to be on private insurance. I would ask any of the Democrats who were chuckling just now, do you think all of that money, that $900 billion we're sending to Medicaid every year, has made Americans healthy? Do we think it's working for anybody?
Wow.
Like,
these are sacred cows. Yeah.
Totally. Because, this is supposed to be about equality. Like, he's been attacked, and anybody who said such things would be attacked, and in terms of, saying like, well, don't you think that access to healthcare is a human right? And it's not that I would argue against that, but they're not getting healthcare.
Well, it's like the term vaccines. What do you mean by healthcare is what I'm asking, right? Like, do I think access to pediatric castrations and mastectomies is a human right? No. Do I think access to unlimited, like, bullshit psych diagnoses and then medications to treat those, completely subjective, non-scientific conditions is a human right? No, I think it's a human rights violation what's happening, that we're all being medicalized. I wanted to tell Genevieve, I'm having a hard time typing the name of the study, but she had asked what the name of the study was. It's Vaccination and Neurodevelopmental Disorders, a study of 9-year-old children enrolled in Medicaid. And it's in Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law, published 1/23/25. Yeah, I think it's great that he's saying these things, because again, these are sacred cows on the left in particular. Of course, the Affordable Health Care Act is a good thing. When the Affordable Health Care Act, in my opinion, as a healthcare provider, is a few good things wrapped up in a whole lot of fascism. Like that act created a massive surveillance state operation. It mandated electronic public records, which means people no longer have any privacy in their medical records. It mandated all kinds of, management of the population, like we're livestock or cattle, and providers are punished for not following these algorithms, for not for having patients refuse vaccines, or for having patients that aren't compliant with mammography. The providers lose money if they're not, getting those things done with their patients, if they're not bullying their patients into complying. And I mean, there's so many things wrong with it. There are just so many things wrong with the Affordable Care Act. Also, it's not working. It's no longer affordable. Insurance is just as expensive as it was before the ACA right now, and rising, and more people are uninsured because they can't afford the plans. Like, it's been a failure. It's been an absolute disaster. And it has also resulted in greater medicalization of the population. When people have access to all of this insane medicalization, they get medicalized for things that really shouldn't be chronic illnesses. And then they never get better because their access to so-called healthcare is just this disease maintenance machine that wants all of us to be daily pharmaceutical addicts.
Well, and somebody asked the other day why on X, why there was such a high rate of people being prescribed antidepressants in America. And people often like to respond to those questions with like, capitalism makes people depressed. And I was like, well,
no, I mean, it is capitalism. Capitalism likes to
I guess so.
manufacture fake illnesses and then sell you the cure for it.
Yeah, and like set you up for failure by plugging you into the internet and not suggesting that you go outside and get some exercise, but that
Oh,
instead you take all these pills. But obviously it's that, these pills are over prescribed,
mhm.
and because your doctor isn't giving you genuine health information for the most part. Again, like,
Oh.
it's the best way to deal with anxiety and depression is to go to the gym, honestly.
Oh,
Like, it makes such a
absolutely.
big difference. It will make a huge difference in terms of your mental health, and then you won't be reliant on these pills that have all these other horrible side effects.
Exactly. But, that's considered anti-science, woo-woo. That's not. Also, people say it's ableist. So, the
Yeah, it's like an attack on people who are depressed. Like, don't you understand? We
Mhm.
can't go to the gym. And it's like, well, you can. It's hard. I also hate going to the gym. Like, people act like it's like, oh, well, I'm too depressed to go to the gym. And like, I'm not going to pretend that I know what it's like to deal with serious depression. I think, based on everything that I've learned and read and everybody that I've talked to about this over the years, that things like depression and anxiety are really mostly rooted in like childhood trauma, like
Mhm.
serious cases of depression and anxiety that are struggling with this your entire life. Um, but it also has a ton to do with your lifestyle. And if you are genuinely miserable in your life, then you need to change your life. And there are things that you can do to do that. Like, stop pretending like you're so helpless. It's just not true.
Yeah, there's so many factors at play. One is what was considered depression in the 60s and 70s was a really rare presentation where people catatonic, like could not get out of the bed, like really constantly wanting to kill themselves. There was the whole concept of too of like people would have a nervous breakdown, go admit themselves somewhere, get a break from their life, and then recover and go on. They didn't have a perpetual nervous breakdown like everyone's being encouraged to have right now, right? Like you
Hmm.
could have like your stress gets to the point where you were allowed to just have a nervous breakdown, and you could go to an asylum or go to where rich people would go to the spa where they would take care of you. And most people got through those episodes and got better. Have you read Robert Whitaker's book, Anatomy of an Epidemic?
No,
You would love that book. It's all about the psych meds and how they have created such worse outcomes.
okay, I'll
Whitaker is
write it
a
down.
medical journalist. It'd be great if you to interview him. He's really brilliant. And he breaks it down that mental health outcomes have gotten worse every year since the advent of these drugs. They're not curing anyone's depression. And in
Hmm.
fact, because there's a profit motive in the United States medical system, we're selling people the idea they're depressed. I remember all the Prozac ads that would have the little sad face, like a circle with just a blah face. And then when it took the Prozac, it became a happy face, like just like blatant propaganda. But the drugs
And it sounds like
create,
it's being sold to children. Like, that's
yes,
something that, like,
or
are you
infantilize
sad?
people.
Do you want to be happy instead?
Oh. Anatomy of Epidemic is a really good book about the history of all of this. And then Gary Greenberg's work, like the Book of Woe, which is all about the DSM and just how, like, it's literally bullshit. His argument is the DSM is not scientific. He interviews this very prominent psychiatrist who had a role in the one of the original DSMs. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that has all the psych diagnoses, and it's this ever expanding, like all your opportunity to pathologize your feelings. And he's interviewing this guy, and the guy is like really frustrated with how it's moving and how more and more things are getting pathologized. And this very prominent psychiatrist says accidentally on the record, psychiatry is bullshit. And he is a psychiatrist. And Greenberg quotes him in a Wired article, and it creates this enormous stir in psychiatry, and in people are paying attention to that. And everyone's coming down on Gary Greenberg about breaking the rules of how you represent your sources. And so he writes this book, The Book of Woe, on the DSM. And the whole premise of it is psychiatry bullshit? And he finds that in the philosophy department of Harvard, they actually have a whole specialization of the philosophy of bullshit, where they have definitions of what bullshit means. And he's like, does psychiatry meet these definitions? And comes to the final conclusion that yes, the whole field is bullshit. It's just based on subjective answers. It may as well be like surveys from Cosmopolitan or other women's magazines, right? There's no objective findings for this whole field of medicine is not based on anything objective. Right. So his books are great. He also wrote Manufacturing Depression, which is a fantastic look at how normal human feelings became a disease in people's minds.
Okay, I'll have to read.
Sorry, I'm like going on and on.
No, don't apologize. I love this information. I think it's super interesting because a lot of it is stuff that like I suspect or that I like know based on, again, like listening to and talking to and reading about and so on and so forth, but I'm not able to like cite data and studies and so on and so forth. And Spado in the live chat says, antidepressants having a side effect of increased suicidality always seemed really sus to me. And, you know, in the hearing today, somebody, I can't remember which Democrat, asked RFK Jr. about having said, like he didn't say this, but they asked him about having said that antidepressants cause mass shootings or school shootings or something like that. Is it true or is that not true? And he's like, well, I can't say if it's true or not true. There haven't been any like studies done on it, and we should do studies. But there also like there is evidence that links SSRIs to mass shooters.
They cover it up, but absolutely there's evidence on it. Even back to Columbine, both of those shooters had recently either started antidepressant medication or had their medication change within the last couple of weeks. There's another book called Medication Madness, and I can't remember the name of the psychiatrist who wrote that, but it's specifically about how these medications make people behave in either severely self-harming or criminally harming other ways, you know. And he's testified in many cases saying that the drugs played a role in this horrible act of violence that someone committed who had no history of violence and who had no real motivation that you could think of legally. Like there was no motive to act this way. So there's quite a bit of evidence, like pieces of evidence, but RFK is right. They refuse to study it. Let's study it. Have all these school shooters been on antidepressants? The brainwashed lefties, it's mostly liberals who are in this chemical imbalance. I need my psych meds. It has become polarized of who's taking these drugs politically.
I'm full of anxiety and I can't do anything about it. Yeah. It's the system's fault. Like, how are you going to feel better if you keep blaming capitalism? I mean, obviously, I don't think these people want to feel better. I'm like endlessly angry about this sort of, I think it was a millennial trend that Gen Zs, I think, probably do it as well. But I think it started with the millennials where they constantly are, you know, it's all these internet memes that are like, oh, like, I don't ever want to leave the house. I don't want to get off the couch. Like, I make plans and cancel them. The world is so bad. The world's on fire. Everything is terrible. Let's just lie in bed and rot. And isn't this funny and cute? And I'm like, it's not funny and cute. And none of it's true. And you need to build relationships with real people. Like, what is this, like, anti-people, anti-speaking? Of course, I don't want to talk to anybody. I have anxiety. It's like, well, it's not going to, your anxiety is not going to be cured by avoiding people and the outside world. Like, and I just don't think it's funny. Like, it's not like, you know, sort of like glorifying depression and anxiety. And like glorifying never leaving the house and never doing anything and never going out to the bar and having fun, or like, being afraid to talk to your barista or whatever. Like, I don't know, you know, it's anecdotal evidence, but I think it's universal that whenever I've felt bad, like if I feel anxious about a thing or my life for whatever reason, or if I'm feeling sad or depressed or whatever it is, if I leave the house and go to the gym or go to the tienda, or like, you know, you're forced to engage with people and then you feel better. And everything doesn't
Absolutely.
seem so bad because you're not sitting in your house ruminating. You engage with other people. You automatically sort of have to be forced to lighten up because you have to talk to people and be friendly. And that has a genuine impact on your brain. It just does.
We are social animals and we need to socialize with each other. And that, when did that become controversial? Like, that's just known.
Yeah.
And I mean, that gets into the executive order ordering all federal employees to get back to an actual workplace. And in my opinion, if you are someone who works in the workforce, it's good for you to have workmates. It's good for you to socialize with people.
That's how a lot of people have friends and find partners, actually. It was always at work. Like,
right. Work is an important place of socialization. And this isn't just about, we're tired of like the taxpayers paying people to phone it in their pajamas. It really is about, in my opinion, creating a healthier society where it's important to have relationships. And even if you don't like your coworkers, it's important then to learn how to cope with people you don't like. It's important to have the skills to be able to be around disagreeable people, to be around people that you don't want to be friends with. And also it's a great opportunity to make friends, like you were saying, and to just have a social life. Being at home and just being on the computer all day is not good for people.
I mean, it's all framed as sort of like a productivity issue. And I've never related that much to that feeling that some people feel very strongly about, like, people are getting handouts and they're taking tax. Maybe I should feel more passionately about this issue. I just don't personally feel that passionately about this issue of, like, I'm working harder than this person, or like, they're getting welfare for lying on their ass. Like, it just doesn't. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it doesn't personally bother me that much, in the same way that actually immigration has never bothered me very much. But I understand why there's an issue around illegal immigration, for sure. I get it. But
I just have to, somebody, Dakini Chick is saying you both work from home. No, I don't work from home. Don't accuse me of working from home. I'm in my office right now. I have a busy clinical practice. I see at least 20 people a day, and I work with coworkers, and I have colleagues who share an office with me. I don't work from home.
No,
I'm not sure why you're projecting that
all the time. I work from home, but man, like, I socialize more than any of you. I fucking promise you. Like, I have a lot of friends and I deal with a lot of people in my real life, but I also, my whole job is talking to other people. Like, I'm interviewing people, I'm engaging with people all the time. And, I mean, I'm not against I'm not against people working from home. This is not, my major issue is, like, but it is true that, like, I know because I live in Mexico, so I know a lot of people who work online. I know a lot of these people who are, digital nomads, if you want to call them that. And I know that they don't do very much work. I know that they, get up at 10 a.m. and work for 2 hours and then go to yoga and kind of fuck off for the rest of the day. And yeah, sometimes I do get resentful that they make more money than me for working 2 hours a day, and I work until 1 a.m. and don't make very much money, but I love what I do, so I don't care, and I'm happy in my life and whatever. So it's not out of bitterness that I'm necessarily like, get back to work, but at the same time, first of all, I do think that it's good for people to do that. And I do know it, again, Canadians who were sent home, who worked for the government or the city or whatever, not necessarily the federal government, in many cases the municipal government, or the province, who were sent home during COVID, never went back to work, and they do fuck all. They do fuck all. And these were the people who were demanding the mandates continue, who were vilifying everybody who was challenging the mandates, because they like to stay home, including the teachers and the teachers union. The teachers unions didn't want to go back to work. The teachers all refused and protest because it's a health, you weren't in danger. You just don't want to go back to work, and you're getting paid. Screw you. Like, you're hurting all of these kids, all of these families, this entire country. And, go to your job. You're making really good money. Teachers in BC make good money. Sorry, they do.
Yeah, remember when the teachers were clamoring to be declared non-essential? That blew my mind and really made me forever skeptical of public education. I'm like, you all realize, like, by saying you should be working remotely, you are in the class of workers called non-essential workers in this psyop we're living through, which basically means the economy could function without you at all, right? So this is my thing of like, these people ended up working from home for the government because of the COVID situation. It wasn't, their jobs were not originally designed to be from home. We're still paying taxpayer money rent on these giant government buildings, on these, you know, the infrastructure where people are not working. And I think let's reset, get back into the office. And if your job is non-essential, maybe it shouldn't be a taxpayer funded job.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, things like teachers in particular, it's like, no, you can't teach kids from the internet. Sorry,
No,
you can't. That's ridiculous.
I have no faith in any teacher who went along with that willingly and thought that was a good idea, and who justified it and made all sorts of comments like, we're doing really well, we're doing exciting things, the kids are learning so much. No, the kids didn't learn anything. It would have been better just to suspend school for 2 years than to socialize children to just be plugged into a screen all day and learn nothing and not have any interaction with other children.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're getting paid by, you know, if this is like taxpayer money and you're not working, then no, like maybe you shouldn't have a job. Maybe that job shouldn't exist then. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what, like I work at home, Zucchini Chick, because I work for myself and because I've cultivated an audience over 15 years and I've been, you know, working as an independent writer and podcaster, and I've taken a great deal of personal and professional risks. And again, because my income as a result of these choices is probably smaller than most of yours who are watching right now. And I don't think that there's very many people in the world who could do what I do. There's not very many people who could make a living through writing and podcasting in general. And I did it for free for many, many years while I was in school and working like 3 or 4 other part-time jobs. So I don't know where you think I'm going to go work. Like, where am I going to go get a job? Like after with what I have done with my life, do you think I should stop doing this and like go try to get a job for the government? Do you think the government would hire me?
This is what's happening as part of this split of like, who actually has meaningful work and who doesn't, right? That, like you working from home is not the same as someone
me plugging in and answering some emails and then going to yoga class and getting paid, you know, $80,000 a year.
I really wish people clamoring to work on their computers from home would understand what I've been saying from the beginning of the COVID, whatever we want to call that. If your job can be done entirely on a computer, and from anywhere, your job can probably be done by an AI within the next couple of years.
That's the other thing. It's like, you're going to be actually out of a job soon. So you should probably start thinking about this.
Yeah, you're literally a non-essential worker. You were happy to declare yourself that, get paid some, free money from the government for it. Well, not free. That like now we're all paying more for everything because you can't just print a bunch of money and expect inflation not to rise. But if your whole job is done in front of a computer, whether that's telemedicine or mental health or just data entry, you're going to be replaced by an AI very soon, like within the next handful of years, almost certainly.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit more about the anti-trans kid executive order?
Yes, I'm always up for that.
I mean, so first of all, because it connects to this discussion of Medicare or Medicaid, because they were providing coverage for the transing of kids, which is crazy. So that's all done with. So no more covered transing of kids, no more funding for the transing of kids at a federal level. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think we have some questions that I don't know if I have an answer to around this issue actually? And one of them was from George, and he said, assuming transing the kids becomes globally banned within a few years, how do you think the gender people like that will react? I have a feeling a large part will still hang on and exclaim how all these far right governments led to taking away the gender kids' life saving healthcare.
I think the cognitive dissonance will be extreme. I think I think people will dig in. I think a certain subset will dig in, and then some others will be really angry. I think the trial lawyers are going to make bank, and a lot of people who had this done to them will, have this sad, not really compensation of just getting a giant payout from who did this to them. So I think some people will fall into that channel of just suing about it. A subset will just detransition, the ones who haven't gone too far into it, and then some will dig in. I wonder about the parents who eagerly did this to their kids. I wonder how they will process it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the wokes, the progressives or whatever will try to, cling to the trans charade, but I just don't think it'll work. I just don't think any of this is working on people anymore. So I think that some people said, I posted on Twitter something along the lines of, that I mentioned this earlier, Canada won't have the balls to cling to the transing of kids after this executive order and, the charade is over. And some people, I think, responded were like, yeah, if a conservative government wins, but not if the liberals stay in power, not if Justin Trudeau has anything to do with it. Justin Trudeau doesn't have anything to do with anything anymore. He's out. If the liberals stay in power, then yeah, they might try to maintain this. I still don't think that the Liberal Party is going to win the election after all of they've done. If Canada votes the liberals back into power again, then Canada can fuck itself. Like, if you guys are so fucking stupid after all that the Liberal Party has done, that you vote them back into power, then you deserve what you get, and everyone who doesn't agree should, I don't know, move. Like, that's Canada's done for. If they keep doing this to themselves, you're not paying attention at all. Like, and this is about the sterilization of the mutilation of kids. And all of the liberals and the progressives who keep coming after me and you and, people like us who are, how can you call yourself a feminist and vote for these like anti-woman, yada, yada, yada. And it's just, first of all, it's not as simple as that, but I'm sorry, this is a really big issue. This is about destroying kids' lives. This is unethical. This is criminal. This is criminal. What they're doing is criminal. Don't vote for a government that is okay with this or that promotes it. Like, this isn't that complicated. It's wrong. There's nothing about this that is like acceptable. They're minors.
It's wrong. It's malpractice. It's beyond malpractice. It's evil. Yeah. This is really an evil thing to do to somebody. These kids will never have a normal life. They never have a shot at a normal life. They are lifelong pharmaceutical dependents. They're infertile. But the same people pushing this don't have a problem with surrogacy and the egg market, the human gamete market. They're all into that. So they're like, they're not really infertile. They can always use a surrogate. It's just, it really is a split. Like, I don't know how there could ever be any common ground. And I just hope more people are swinging towards sanity and don't want this to continue. But I don't know. I think that true believers are just going to dig in harder and harder.
Too bad. Too bad. I don't think anybody cares about them anymore. I think that they've always been a minority, and now it's going to become glaringly obvious what a minority these crazy people are.
Yeah, I think so too. I have suspicions, and I hope I'm wrong, that things are about to get really, that we're about to have real problems. That aren't like maybe a war, maybe pretty intense economic issues. I think the collapse of the healthcare system that those of us working in the healthcare system are incredibly aware of. I think most Americans aren't quite aware of just how bad the healthcare system is collapsing. I think these real problems we're about to encounter will shift people's perspective, and people won't be as excited about having this huge welfare state. Like, the people are actually working and being functional and getting tired of it. And two, there just won't be the resources to continue participating in this facade. Most of these trans kids, their families wouldn't have paid out of pocket for this. And
it's so expensive, and it's going to continue to be so expensive. I mean, it's not just a one and done thing. When you get these surgeries, there's usually complications, or they don't stick. Like when we're talking about like phalloplasty and these really gross experimental surgeries, they usually don't work, and they have to keep fixing and trying to reattach, and there's infections, and it's
the phalloplasties.
Endless, right?
Are there actual cases of the phalloplasties on girls, on children? I know they're doing
I'm not sure, but I mean, they're young women, right? And it's been a build up to that situation. There's obviously mastectomies that happen to minor girls. The girls go on the puberty blockers and the hormones and get the mastectomies. I suspect the phalloplasties. I've not heard of a phalloplasty that's happened underage, but certainly very young women, and it's horrific what happens to those young women.
Even thinking about the phalloplasty is so stomach churning. It's just such literal Frankenstein medicine. Like, this is right out of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, trying to take, like tissue from the thigh and make this like sausage roll of a fake penis. It's so disgusting. I can't believe anyone is signing up for this, and that these criminals aren't in jail for it. And watching the mentally ill women on testosterone with their mastectomy scars talking about their suprapubic catheters and their incontinence and their gangrene over and over again. Like, that's not rare with that operation. It goes wrong more than it. I don't know what going right is. You can't give a woman a penis, The society's so sexist, and they believe the vagina is just a fuckhole, that they believe you can give a man a vagina, right? Even though you can't. You
but make a hole, and then you attach a dildo to somebody else's body, and then
sounds great. Sounds like a lot of fun and mutually satisfying. It's just so crazy. Yeah. But it's so obvious that the phalloplasty is nowhere near anything that so-called passes. It's just barbarism all around.
I think the trans and kid thing is done. I think the pretending that men are women because they say so is done.
Did you see the order to expel all the transgender service members from the military?
Yes.
I think it's great.
It's very funny to me because people are like, they're banning trans from the military. And they're like, well, you can't be in the military if you have mental health problems. So what's your story? Or if you're on all these drugs.
Look, it's not a mental health issue. Then we get back to the DSM, which is literally listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It has to be some kind of medical disorder for you to get it paid for by public insurance.
What are you being treated for?
Right. It's either...
What's the healthcare that you need for? The problem is that...
based, it's just a cosmetic thing that shouldn't be covered, or if it is being covered, it's a disorder. And people with disorders that affect their entire lives shouldn't be in the military.
Yeah, exactly. It's not even funny. It's crazy to me how much people lie and how much they're lying about everything. That the media and progressives in general, they state outright lies, and they're totally unashamed. And one of those lies was they're banning trans people. I mean, they tried this with the sports issue too, where they said they're banning trans people from sports, and they're like, nope, they're banning males from pretending to be female and competing as female in women's sports. And they're first of all, there's no such thing as a trans person. And if you want to say that this person has some kind of disorder where they think they were born in the wrong body, I guess that makes them a crazy person, so they can't join the military.
Right.
Like you're the one saying it. We didn't invent this.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't make sense to us either.
From the beginning of my investigation of this issue, when I was like, oh, this doesn't seem right, this seems really dangerous, the maddening doublespeak of the trans community has remained consistent, right? It's perfectly normal, but it's a disorder that the taxpayers have to cover the treatment for, right? It's not a disease or a mental illness, but it requires massive lifelong medical treatment. It's like they can't step back for a second to see how illogical and ridiculous they are. How have so many people bought this?
There was another lie that's been going around also, that, or whatever, maybe it's partly true, I'm not sure. I think that it's kind of BS, but somebody tweeted, wow, Trump will sign an executive order to deport anyone with a student visa who spread transphobia, homophobia, anti-Black racism, and Islamophobia. Oh, wait, no, it's to deport anyone who criticized Israel and spread anti-Semitism, because of course it is, and conservatives cheer. And somebody tagged me in this tweet. This is how I saw it, and said, did you cheer this, Meghan Murphy? I was like, that's not a thing that happened. So no, I guess not. But I mean, what did happen is that Trump issued an executive order that would deport people who are a terrorist threat. And so, yeah, if you're on a student visa and you're not an American citizen and you're cheering on terrorism, then maybe you'll be viewed as a terrorist threat, and then you can't live in America anymore. I don't understand what people think a country is. Like, what do you think a border does? Like, I don't love the idea of a bunch of Mexicans getting deported. I really don't. Yeah. I really like Mexicans. That's not exactly how this is going down. Like, they're deporting criminals, and there is a really, really big problem with fentanyl coming across the border and with child sex trafficking, and that has to do with cartels. Like, I think it's the Venezuelan gangs who are running all that shit in San Francisco. Like, it's a really, really bad situation. And if you're here illegally and you're committing crimes, then yeah, of course you get deported. Like, I don't understand what the argument is. The argument literally for an open border? Like, what do you think the system should be in that case? Anybody can come to America and do whatever they want whenever they feel like it, and they're entitled to. I don't understand like the thinking here.
I think the far left doesn't like borders. I've spent enough time with Revcom, the Revolutionary Communist people who were Stop Patriarchy, and then we went to that Affirm conference with the in New York. And both of those groups are very anti-border. They think the border itself should be abolished, and it will just be pure chaos. You can't have a country and not have a border.
But then what's the point of having a country? What's the country if there's no border? It doesn't make any sense.
Now you sound like a nationalist, which means you're a Nazi.
Right.
I
mean, I guess the slogan literally was, for lots of these people, no borders.
Yeah. Just don't have a border.
Globalists. They're globalists.
Yeah, they are globalists. It's true. They're globalists. But so many of them were marching with the anti-globalization movement back in 99. It's like in the same way the people who were marching against GMOs were advocating that everyone had to be genetically modified with that GMO tech vaccine. It's like they don't have a personal guiding ethos. I think a lot of them just are received knowers who just regurgitate whatever the cool people have said, and they want to be one of the cool people, or who they perceive to be the cool people, and they don't understand how ridiculous their ideas are. You have to have borders. You can't just have a country with no borders.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really that they're just not thinking things through very well. And I think that they're thinking that they're operating from a place of empathy, but that's just not how you can do laws.
No.
And governance,
you can't.
I'm afraid.
It doesn't work that way. It's just checking. Sorry, my stuff is all falling apart. Anyway, I think I'm excited that we have a border again. There will be suffering when you kick people out of the country. There's no way around that. There's no way around that. On a very basic level, that people on the left don't want to acknowledge. If people are here illegally, they are by nature criminals.
Right.
And I'm hoping they're going
and
after.
I have empathy for a lot of those people. Yeah. I mean, I hope that it's true that what they're actually trying to do is stop all this fentanyl from coming across the border that is killing people, because that is true. That really is happening. It's not made in America. And, you know, all these kids, all these minors who are disappearing, you know, it's just tens of thousands of girls. I mean, kids in general, but, you know, tens of thousands of girls who are being sex trafficked across the border, coming across the border and just disappearing into sex trafficking. And, you know, it's not like, oh yeah, I think these kids are going to have way better lives back home, but maybe they will. I mean, this is just the worst thing that I could imagine for a kid, being brought across the border without their family or parents or anything, and not speaking the language, and then being raped for the rest of their lives. Like right. Jesus Christ. I mean, it was funny because there was that big people made a lot of fun of Selena Gomez because she posted this video of herself. Celebrities are so out of touch. It's just incredible. It's like, you guys really, really, really have no idea what's going on out there and what people think of you. Like, you are not reading the room.
Right.
You know, first of all, anyone who posts a video of themselves crying is a huge phony. No normal person has a very emotional feeling and starts crying and whips out their phone to film themselves. And can you imagine still crying while you were filming yourself and trying, you know, like, it's not, you're acting. This is so phony and so transparently phony, and you think that this is gonna work on people and convince them that you're, you know, super empathetic and you're so concerned about your people. They're not her people. She was born in Texas, I believe, and, you know, she was not from Mexico. But also, like, what she was saying was just, you know, all these kids, and I was like, it's not really kids. Like, you know, it's supposedly and supposed to be, and for now in any case, and if something changes, then maybe I'll change my mind. We'll see. But yeah, criminals, like, and I saw somebody else post something about, like, oh, you know, then don't come to Mexico. If you want to kick all the Mexicans out of America, then maybe you shouldn't come to Mexico. And I'm like, I'm not here illegally, and I'm not committing any crimes. And if I did commit a crime and I was here illegally, then I would get deported. I know people who've been deported from Mexico who are here illegally.
Right.
Like, I'm not.
I know people have been deported from Mexico too.
Right. Like, I don't. They're just not thinking. They're thinking. I think that they're just knee-jerking into thinking this is just racism and it's not fair. It's like, no, not everybody is entitled to go live in whatever country they want. You know, I know tons of Canadians who would love to live in America and they can't because they don't have citizenship. Like, this is just how it works, and it sucks in a lot of cases. It sucks. Like, it was hard for my dad to live in America, and he was married to my mother. Like, it's hard to get American citizenship.
Yeah, it's fascinating watching these people, and that, like, it's the same thing. They just dig in further. They don't believe anybody should be kicked out of the country, no matter how egregious. And this comes back to the trans thing, and that ad that the Trump campaign ran, that Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. And it had footage of Harris being interviewed, I think by the ACLU, saying that she supported federally funded so-called sex change operations for illegal immigrants in federal prisons. And there's nothing.
It's like, what?
These people, for all their talk about healthy boundaries, cancel your grandma, have healthy boundaries, never talk to your mom again because she voted the wrong way. These people literally have no boundaries. Like, they will not set any kind of behavioral expectations or boundaries for the country. There's nothing ridiculous that they won't support if it's about trans or illegal immigrants or, you know, their pet causes. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's totally It's totally strange and totally I mean, all I can conclude in most cases is that people just aren't really thinking. And that
Maybe.
they're reading mainstream media headlines, and those headlines are lying to them. I mean, the fact that people still trust the mainstream media after what the mainstream media has been doing for the past 10 years, and especially over the last 4 years, and like outright lied to you over and over and over and over and over again, and you still read a mainstream media headline, or like hear some Democrat politician saying that like kids are being taken out of their classroom and deported back to Mexico, which is not a thing that happened, you know. Why do you still believe these people?
Exactly. They're just, yeah, they can't listen to anyone else because those sources are sources only bad people listen to. They can't let themselves deviate from their propaganda streams and remain a good person.
Right. I mean, this is never going to end, so whatever. But, you know, I said something about the COVID vaccines, you know, causing more harm than good. And, you know, there's data to show that, you know, those vaccines cause more harm and more than they saved lives. And somebody asked me where I got the information from. And I was like, it's this really big book full of data and statistics and research and evidence that RFK Jr. wrote. It's quite well researched. I don't know how you can argue with CDC data. Like it's the data that you love.
And as RFK says again,
they're like, who? Oh, forget that, because RFK Jr. wrote it, and he's a kook and a conspiracy theorist, and he's bad. And I was like, well, why don't you read it and then tell me what you think? No, I would never. You seem to have a really strong opinion about a book that you refuse to read.
You refuse to read it. He has brain worms. He's like, it's just, they refuse to engage with the actual data over and over again. I hope most people are happy with the changes. I'm not entirely optimistic. I think history is brutal, and I don't trust people in power. But I think this country needed a change like this. Like you can't, like we say, you can't not have a border. You can't be just sterilizing kids on the taxpayers' dime. I'm really happy with a lot of the changes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I noticed that I had an argument with Matt Walsh again last night. I happened to notice. I mean, he's such an asshole. He came after Nancy Mace, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, you guys are the ones, you know, him and his little, I don't know, fan base, I suppose, are always, you know, coming after us if we criticize Matt Walsh and being like, this guy's on your side. You guys are being petty and nitpicking and yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. And he goes after Nancy Mace, who's like a powerhouse and getting things done for, you know, the stupidest reason. He said, where is it? So he quote tweets Nancy Mace, who'd said, I didn't fight like hell to become the first woman to graduate from the Citadel just for some man in a miniskirt to take away that achievement. Protecting women's accomplishments isn't a political talking point for me. It's personal. And he responded and said, it always comes down to his just hate on for whatever he thinks feminism is.
For women, yeah.
For women. The girl boss feminism, it's about promoting his own ideology and politics and narrative. That's what I think it is. It's just that he's going to say whatever he needs to say to suit his own narrative. He's exactly like the wokes in that regard. So he says the girl boss feminism routine isn't just cringy. It also directly undermines our argument. Who's our? The Citadel, our argument. Your argument. Walsh. Yeah. The Citadel was a male-only space forced by law to admit females in the name of diversity and inclusion. Maybe he's talking about conservatives. That is the exact argument trans-identifying males use to invade female spaces. Nancy Mace was literally a beneficiary of a DEI program. It's ridiculous and tone-deaf. It's a ridiculous and tone-deaf thing to brag about in this moment.
It's so many things are wrong with that. The term DEI didn't even exist when Nancy Mace went to college. The Citadel is a publicly funded military academy in South Carolina that was desegregated. It was segregated by sex, and it was desegregated, and women were allowed in. And it's like West Point, like the Air Force Academy, the Citadel is a pathway to leadership in the military. So what Matt Walsh is basically saying is we should have no women in leadership in the military. I think the military should be mostly male, but I think we need women in the military. Thinking of
they can do the job, whatever job it is they're trying to do, then of course they should be able to, have access potentially to that job.
Right. I mean, the Israeli military, every woman has to serve in the military just as much as every man. Women can be excellent snipers. Women can be excellent pilots. There are many things women can do. Do I think women can be Navy SEALs? Probably not. If a woman can meet the physical requirements of the military job, I think she should be allowed to do it.
Well, not all military jobs are physical. Like lots and lots of them aren't. So it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, some jobs women can't do. Some of them they can.
And the military itself has had women in it, I think, since we've had a military, but definitely since the World Wars. I mean, both of my mom had many siblings, but two of my aunts were nurses in World War II, and they were in the military. One was in the WACs, but she was a pilot and served in the military, and wasn't considered a combat vet, but had seen combat just because of the nature of her job. Like, women have been in the military a long time. To compare women wanting to go to college to men wanting to be in the women's locker room is just so low. I just can't. I can't believe it.
Stupid. It's just such bad argumentation. Like he says, we rightly lament the death of female-only spaces, but male-only spaces died long before, thanks in part to the efforts of Nancy Mace, as if those spaces are comparable to a bathroom or a change room or a women's prison or a transition house. I mean, it's just so dumb. It's like the males, and then, I never understood what these guys were talking about when they would say it to me, and I was like, what male spaces? Like, what male spaces did women invade? Change rooms? Like, I don't see women clamoring to get into your change room, but also women are just not a threat to men that the way that men are to women either way. And then their responses to me turned out to be things like the Boy Scouts and like universities and the workplace. That was always a big one, like the workplace. And I was like, you're just talking about keeping women out of public life.
Women have always worked.
Like women aren't a danger to you in the workplace. This is just not the same issue at all. Like, we're talking about safety for vulnerable women and girls so that they aren't raped or attacked.
Matt Walsh continues to persist in his misguided belief that feminism created transgenderism. Again, completely ignoring Nero from the Roman Empire, who was a cross-dresser and declared himself a woman. Women, and feminism in particular, did not invent male paraphilias and male sexual deviance that have driven this.
Or these medical processes.
No. And there are women participating in it now, but this was driven by men with power and has predatory, sexually deviant men have wielded a lot of power throughout history. This is, he will not look at that. He still keeps saying it's because girls wanted to play sports. Now, we have trans kids. I'm sure Matt Walsh on some level thinks it's wrong that women invaded the male space of the voting booth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, that was that's where he was trying to get to in his argument, because then after, he complains about the death of male-only spaces, he says, feminism set the stage for transgenderism. The feminists the feminists were first to deny the fundamental and inherent differences between the sexes and the value of sex segregation in many aspects of society. Feminists are largely to blame for the problem that some of them now campaign against. And, I think that feminism deserves a lot of criticism in general and in terms of this issue. I mean, it's not untrue that just because a few of us spoke out, most feminists did. Most so-called feminists didn't speak out and, you know, gender theorists and academia, like, and people like Judith Butler, who they always bring up as a feminist. I don't know anyone that genuinely considers Judith Butler a feminist. I don't even know if she really considers herself a feminist, but whatever.
She
Like,
doesn't
you
even
know,
consider herself a woman.
she's an academic. Like, she's a postmodernist. It's just like, this is not, you know, when I'm thinking about feminists, I'm thinking about first and second wave feminists and women who fight for women's rights. And, you know, then the third wave came along and functioned as a backlash to all of that and introduced intersectionality and, you know, this scale of oppression with, you know, white cis women at almost the bottom, you know, not quite as low as white cis men. And totally bought into and pushed the idea of gender identity and inclusivity. You know, I remember there being a big debate that I was involved with when Slut Walk came along in Canada in like 2011. I was one of the only people to write and speak out against that garbage movement. But, you know, those young women were all like, men can be feminists too, and men should be involved, and men are getting raped and abused just as much as women, and this is a gender issue, not a women issue. And you know, you're right. These women are fucking idiots. They are, and they did destroy feminism, I think. Like, it's not, I'm not trying to deny that, but if you're gonna say the first and set the stage for, that's just not true. That's not how this went down at all. This happened because perverted men and sexologists and male billionaires. It just is. Like, that's all documented.
Right. They won't look at it. There's no changing Matt Walsh. My concern, though, is Matt Walsh and men like him are going to drive all the pissed off women who didn't vote for Democrats because of the trans issue back to the Democrats. You know, countdown to Matt Walsh getting all excited about forcing women to have rape babies, right? Like this, he's so old school. He can't see how damaging he is. If he keeps behaving this way, and so many of these sexist men who are on and, you know, consider themselves like Republicans continue to behave this way, they're not going to stay in power, and we're going to be back to the horrors of the Democrats again. Within 2 years.
I mean, there's the amount of women who cling to the Democrats and to progressivism because of abortion. It's like, then, you know, we see Matt Walsh making all these arguments and then be like, well, you guys were all responsible for killing all these babies, and you shouldn't have a right to decide what happens to your own body because you're a murderer, and we literally want to throw you in jail, which he and his fans totally do, and they've said as much to me. They, you know, they want to criminalize miscarriage and like test women to see if they've taken, you know, abortion pills or whatever so that they can try them for murder. Like, you know, it's like you're not, and then you want to take credit for having turned everything around on the gender issue. I mean, you're turning people away, and you don't know what you're talking about. Like, none of these people know anything about feminist history. They don't know what they mean when they're talking about these waves. You know, half of these guys, when they say first wave feminism, are talking about the 70s. They think that there's some kind of fourth wave. I'm like, no, this isn't. There's first wave, there's second wave, there's third wave. Third wave is primarily like ideological, but started in the 90s. But that's what we're still dealing with right now. This like sex work is work thing, trans women are women, intersectionality, fat positivity, sex positivity, feminist pornography, like pole dancing is empowering, BDSM is empowering and sexually liberating. That's all third wave stuff.
Feminism is for everyone. I mean, I would argue at this point in history, it might be good to just retire the word feminism and just, you know,
doesn't mean anything. It's not useful.
Yeah, I advocate for the rights and interests of women. That doesn't mean I dislike men. I get so tired of having to like qualify that of like, I'm married to a man, I have a son, all of that. But I am a woman, so I'm going to advocate for the rights of people like me. I'm a midwife. I'm a mother. I'm really interested in that. But I'm not sure the word feminism is meaningful. It might need to be relegated to history to describe the fight for the vote, the fight for just being able to have for citizenship, really for full citizenship. People forget that in my lifetime, women couldn't get credit. They couldn't own property. They were the property of their husbands and could be raped at their husband's whim, and it wasn't illegal. There were really important fights that women had to make to just be recognized as citizens with constitutional rights in the United States, and not just women are fighting everywhere. Maybe feminism is still an important word in some place like Afghanistan or India, but I'm not.
I think still be women's rights, like the rights of women and girls. You know, stopping male violence against women and girls. I mean, what does feminism mean in Afghanistan?
Right, exactly.
Especially considering how many feminists don't ever talk about Afghanistan ever.
Oh, they never talk about it because that's
like
Islamophobic.
think that wearing the hijab is, empowering for women if they choose it.
Super empowering, yeah.
And you can't criticize it because you're racist.
I know. Yeah, I despise Matt Walsh. I really wish he would just shut up. And one of the reasons I despise him this week is he's going to blow it. He's just giving the left ammunition.
Right.
And we're at this place where the majority of Americans were fed up with the status quo of both parties. Really, I mean, Trump isn't really a Republican in the old sense of the word, right? Something new is happening. Things are getting shaken up. We want to change. And Matt Walsh is going to blow it. Men like him are just going to blow it. And we're going to be back to the tyranny of whatever the hell we were living under during the Biden administration.
Having a debate around abortion until we die.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Legal, not legal. Legal, not legal. I want to get to, there was a couple more questions. One from Patreon from Larry, who said, in the last 50 years, there has been a huge shift to women in leadership positions, i.e. academia, boards, professions, etc. Did this have a role in the development of the woke mind virus? And if so, why? What? I mean, I think DEI did, for sure, like just sort of plugging people into various positions because of their status as like female, Black, mentally retarded.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how you can parse that out of why we reached this place historically and developmentally. I think that when women unnaturally rise to positions of power, like through affirmative action and DEI, and not just women, people who are benefiting from those not merit-based things, it negatively impacts the culture, and it maybe has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're talking about like, is it more important to have lesbians in the fire department over people who can fight fires effectively?
Yeah, and rescue you from the house. Yeah.
I think that is the woke mind virus. Like it's making identity more important than reality.
Kind of a chicken egg situation. I think it's more this misplaced idealism, and a certain subset of people always just think we can legislate or use the government to create a utopia, and it never goes well, whether it's the woke mind virus here or what happened in the Soviet Union or what happened in China. It's I think that it's that desire to create a utopian society always creates hell on earth.
Yeah, trying to force equality or, force something that doesn't match material reality because you think that would be a better world.
And these ideals and platitudes get spouted and you're not allowed to question them, and it just ends up being like literal party line dogma, and no one can step out of line, and it ends up being any kind of ideology like that creates a problem. I think that there are plenty of I don't think you can blame this on the women's movement any more than you can blame Maoism on the women's movement. Like, this is something that happens in societies where totalitarian idealists take over and things go wrong.
Well, and there's lots of things that I think various iterations of feminism screwed up on, or that, various feminists screwed up on. I mean, it isn't a monolith, and that's perhaps another good reason why we should get rid of the term feminism entirely, because then people reference like Shulamith Firestone, who I think was kind of insane, and
she was insane and unhappy.
Really unhappy. Yeah, no, genuinely mentally ill.
Yeah.
But like she was advocating for kind of transhumanism and saying things along the lines of like, what's really the difference between men and women, right?
Or like when people call Valerie Solanas an influential feminist with her Society for Cutting Up Men. She was crazy. She literally shot Andy Warhol. Like she wrote an Insane Person Manifesto. She wasn't an influential member of the organic women's liberation movement. She was, she was a woman who was crazy and angry and violent, and wasn't an influential feminist.
Yeah, but I mean, even I think there's probably lots of, and still are lots of crazy feminists. I mean, you've met radical feminists before. A lot of them are totally mentally ill. It's not that, I'm not going to argue with that. But
it's a deep-seated fear of mine that I'm a crazy feminist. Sometimes when I'm at these gatherings, and it's like, oh my gosh, there are so many unhinged people. Like, am I similarly unhinged?
I mean, I just don't really go to those things anymore. It's just like, oh, these people are very antisocial.
Yeah.
No wonder they're all addicted to the Democrats, and they think that we're all like insane far-right Nazis who are voting for Trump, because they don't leave their houses or have normal real friends in real life. Like, they are not engaging with working class Latino men who would tell them why they were voting for Trump.
Exactly. Yeah, social movements attract fringe people too. You don't attract normies from under the middle of the bell curve. And I think there's so many things to say, but no, to answer that question, I think that's a chicken egg kind of question. And I don't think it's because there are too many women in positions of power that the woke mind virus has taken over.
I see what it means, though. Like, I mean, I don't know that Larry is trying to blame women in positions of power for the woke mind virus, but probably asking if that played a role. And, I'm not saying this is what he's thinking or meaning by this. I'm just saying in general, because I have been thinking about this lately for whatever reason. It's like, I don't think that it's bad to have women in positions of power. And I don't like this argument that says, women aren't good leaders. This isn't their nature. They haven't evolved to be in these positions of power. Like, maybe in general, men are better leaders because, frankly, like, men feel more entitled to take power and to take on leadership roles, and also to take credit. Like, this is one of the things that we've seen happen over and over and over throughout history, and of late, within the gender identity debate or issue or whatever, is that men feel really comfortable taking credit for women's work. And often, I don't even know if it occurs to them that they're doing that. Like, women, I think that the women don't rise to like high paid positions as much as men do, because I personally don't feel comfortable asking for money. I don't assume that I'm the first one to have come up with an idea. I assume that I probably wasn't. whether this, for sure, socialization has to do with it, but maybe evolution has to do with it as well. I tend to think these things are like a mix of both of those things, but that's, that's not necessarily a good thing. The fact that men are out there assuming that they're well suited for this position, and a woman is assuming that she's not well suited for this position when she might be. And there always have been lots of good female leaders, just less than men.
Right.
Women have led their communities.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Absolutely, they have. I mean, yeah. I mean, even, the Old Testament is full of examples of it. I think, these are conversations I just don't want to get into too much. I just want, I want to end the transgender madness. I do want to end the DIEI madness, because I think it's creating more racism. I think it's creating more resentment among people. I don't think it's helping anyone. I think that if I need a cardiac surgeon, I want that person to have gotten through the residency based on merit and actually working hard rather than quotas. Like it's messing with the social fabric in a really bad way to be socially engineering this way. I think I just wanted to focus on the repair more than the post-mortem of it right now, dissecting it and trying to figure out how to, we're never going to figure out exactly how we got there, but we can figure out where we want to go from here.
Another question, this is going back to the EO that we were talking about earlier around ending the transing of kids at the federal level, is from Chris, and she says, I read that these EOs only apply to federal stuff. So in the cases of prisons, state prisons still have men and women's prisons. I think we maybe talked about this a bit last week, didn't we? Yeah. Federal prisons apparently only hold 10% of people incarcerated. I also talk about this on the podcast with Kara Dansky. So I don't, if Chris, you're watching, listen to that conversation, because we do address specifically this question. Also with the EO on kids, private health insurance can still pay for it. What do you guys think Trump should do? Is there any group still fighting this? I feel like the EOs were a good start, but I also feel like there's so much more to do and we haven't won yet. I'd be interested in what you guys think about it. Thanks.
There's so much that can be done. Nearly all public institutions, even on a state level, get some degree of federal funding. So the feds could threaten with that, right? If any federal funding is coming in here, you have to follow the order. This is a hard one for me, because on this issue, I want the feds to exercise power that I don't usually want them to, and maybe I'm being hypocritical, but the federal government can withhold other kinds of funding to coerce the states into doing something that they don't want to do. An example of that would be when I was a young adult, many states had a drinking age of 18. The feds decided that the national drinking age needed to be 21. That was a violation of of states' rights of the 10th Amendment. So the feds said, we won't give you highway funding unless you raise your drinking age to 21. And it was ruled constitutional. And since then, the feds have done that for other things. They can withhold the highway funds are a big deal. They're a really big deal. I don't know how they could justify that with the trans stuff, but probably they could do it through Medicaid and Medicare. Like if you're using 1 cent of this stuff, 1 cent of federal funds to provide healthcare to prisoners. There's hardly any major state institution that is completely free of federal funding.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's impacting private health insurance for anyone who works for the federal government. So one of the sections says the Department of Defense provides health insurance through TRICARE to nearly 2 million individuals under the age of 18. As appropriate and consistent with applicable law, the Secretary of Defense shall commence a rulemaking or sub-regulatory action to exclude chemical and surgical mutilation of children from TRICARE coverage and amend the TRICARE provider handbook to exclude the chemical and surgical mutilation of children.
So beautiful that they keep using that phrase. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big fight. The lawsuits are going to come in. There's already a lawsuit on the federal prisons. Yes, it's only 10% of prisoners in the United States, but 15% of the prisoners in women's prisons federally are men. 15% of, so 1 in 6 prisoners in the women's prison is a man. And of them, over 50% of them are in there for sex crimes. So sick. I can't believe anyone on the left is justifying this. The level of hate and dehumanization of women in prison, and the number of lefties I've heard say it's cruel and unusual punishment to put a so-called trans woman in a men's prison, but they don't think it's cruel and unusual punishment to lock a woman in a jail cell with a rapist.
Well, I think what they're like, well, everybody's getting raped anyway. And they're like, well, if these guys are in men's prisons, then they're going to get raped. And it's like, well, yeah, that is a really horrible thing that happens in men's prisons, but it doesn't mean that women should take the brunt of that. Like, I don't think that's the answer to this issue, is now that women have to be forced to be raped by male sexual predators and violent criminals when they have almost no rights and no voice to speak out against this.
And they're literally being locked in jail cells with convicted sex perps. It's
so gross.
It's so horrific. And the level of complete disregard for women, and the endless compassion for any man who calls himself trans has infinite compassion from these people. And that it's just so disgusting.
I mean, this is just happening on a federal level, but I think it provides an impetus for the states and it emboldens everyone. I mean, the reason that all the provinces in Canada started, teaching gender identity ideology in schools and pretending as though the law of the land that men were allowed in any women's spaces they wanted to if they identified women was because the federal government said so. It wasn't because the federal government dictated that all the provinces do that. They just sort of fell in line. This became the new norm. So now this is becoming the new norm.
Yeah, you're right. And we've watched how quickly things can change. Let's let it change quickly in this direction. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens next.
Me too.
No.
Fun times. Okay.
Do we have any more questions, or should we?
No, that's good. I think we can wrap up. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And yeah, if you're interested to learn more about the executive order protecting biological reality and women's sex-based rights and so on and so forth, I did an interview with Kara Dansky about this, and you can find that on Spotify or on my Substack at www.meghanmurphy.ca. I would appreciate it if you go over to Spotify and find the Same Drugs podcast and click the follow button. That's all you have to do. It's very easy, and it helps support the podcast. And yeah, I'm interviewing May Mailman tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully next week. I'm pretty excited to talk to her. Me and Mary Lou Singleton are here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mexico time. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your support. You can find Mary Lou at enchantedfamilymedicine.com, on Twitter at ML_Singleton. I looked at it the other day and I was like, Megan, ML_Singleton, ML_Singleton. And Mary Lou is on Substack also at Mary Lou Singleton. You can find my gay and retarded shirt at fourthwall.com or by going to meghanmurphy.ca. You have to put in the www.meghanmurphy.ca for some reason, otherwise it doesn't redirect to my Substack properly for some reason that I don't understand. If you click on the shop tab, you can get through to the merch store, which is on fourthwall.com, which has been so awesome. Like, I was banned from so many of these like merch sites for
Yeah.
turfiness or whatever it was, and Fourth Wall lets me put anything that I want on anything up there. So yeah, gay and retarded team turf. I mean, these aren't bad words anymore. Now we're allowed to say retarded, and turfs are like the cool kids, and I'm not even controversial anymore. I'm gonna have to find a new grift, I guess.
Yeah.
And am I forgetting anything about you and your links and your work, Mary Lou? Where else can people find you?
That's where you can find me.
At the clinic,
clinic,
at work.
working really hard.
Working in person, not lying around on the couch.
No, in my pajamas,
Making
postulating.
taxpayer money.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Right.
we'll see everyone next Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night. Good to see you, Mary.
Thanks. Good to see you too. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.